All right, welcome back to another installment of the Wide Right Podcast. I'm Manny Navarro, Miami Hurricanes beat writer for The Athletic, joined once again by Carlos Ledo of the MIA All Day Podcast. It's Sunday, the day after the Bethune-Cookman game, Carlos, and Miami went out and did what it was supposed to do. They handed Bethune-Cookman a 70-13 defeat. I thought, outside of a few defensive mishaps and the fumble by Tyler Van Dyke on the exchange with his backup center, really not a lot to criticize in terms of an execution standpoint. As I wrote in my column for The Athletic today, my takeaways from the game, I thought overall the offense, 9 out of 10 drives, they scored touchdowns. And
the one they didn't
well.
was the fumble. So they should have scored on every drive, which is what I wanted to see.
Good debut for Josh Gaddis on that side, and really the breakdowns on defense are things we've seen in the past. Mm-hmm. I think regardless of the opponent, it doesn't matter sometimes. Who you play, it's just assignment football, right? It's covering the running back out of the backfield. It's making sure that you get in a good position to make a tackle and don't let a guy slip through your fingers. Those kind of things that we've seen in the past, but that's a work in progress. That's not going to be fixed overnight. So. And special teams I thought was great. You had a blocked field goal. You had Keyshawn Smith with some good returns. I know I took most of the material, but you can tell me, being a football guy, a guy who played quarterback at the high school level and being a fan for a long time, what were your takeaways?
Well, first and foremost, TVD was a surgeon out there. He was decisive. He was, crisp. You wanted to see that out of him. We talked about a lot during the preseason going into this year about what's going to happen when the deep ball is taken away from him. And you saw Bethune play a lot of cover four, a lot of deep coverage, giving him a lot of stuff underneath. And he just took what they gave him, and he was making the right reads all day. He was really efficient with the football. He was really accurate with the football, which was good to see. Him and Restrepo, for that touchdown, it was a beautiful play with Restrepo running that double move. The patience shown by TVD, the beautiful fake, and then throwing it right to where he needed to be. Restrepo fighting the sun to get that ball because that was right in his sight line, the sun at that point. I thought it was an excellent performance by TVD. I thought he ran the offense incredibly well. He was smart getting rid of the football when he needed to, didn't take any sacks. I thought the offensive line was fantastic. I thought their run blocking was great. They got a lot of push. Henry Parrish really didn't get touched in the backfield a whole lot, and either Thad got hit a couple times, but kept breaking tackles. I thought their ability to get push up front and really protect the quarterback, they only had, I believe it was 4 pressures all game. Mm-hmm. Bethune-Cookman, and no sacks, which is incredible. That's great on 67 snaps, I think it was total on offense. The defensive line I thought looked good. On occasion, they got a little maybe overzealous and tried to get to the quarterback a little bit too much, getting out of their lanes. We saw that with Nigel Lee Kelly on one of the scrambles by the quarterback, where he collapsed the pocket, but rather than maintaining outside leverage and contain, he tried to push it all the way inside, and the quarterback just ran right around him. Yeah. On that touchdown where Keontre Smith basically missed a back coming out of the backfield on the wheel route, I ended up watching it today, and it seems like he was blitzing as well. James Williams came, and he came right after James Williams. But since there was nobody else left on that side of the field, he needed to check the back first before continuing on the blitz path. So he reacted late, came too flat, and that's where the back came around on the wheel. DJ Ivey was, just doing DJ Ivey things. Lost on coverage a couple times, just not willing to tackle anybody, being in the wrong spots, wrong angles, tripping up his own defenders, getting in the way of making tackles. That was tough to watch. I thought the linebackers were okay. I thought Corey Flagg had his moments. He's a real good blitzer, and every time he blitzed, he really got in there and disrupted plays. Although they didn't blitz that much, I think they might have blitzed 7 times total all game, which is nice to see, which is a shift from the Manny Diaz era where he liked to blitz a lot. Mm-hmm. I think Caleb Johnson looked good. He looked athletic. He still needs to settle in and learn the defense a little bit, but I think he's going to end up being one of the starters down the road and be a big impact player in the team. Overall, they did what they had to do, man. There's a lot to talk about if you want to talk about it in terms of getting into the nitty-gritty of it, but overall, I think they did what they needed to do. The first team offense should have scored on every possession if it wasn't for that fumble. I think, the second team as well. I like the way Jake Garcia looked operating the offense. There's not a lot of bad to talk about, and it's the way it should be when you're facing a team that was 2-9 last year in FCS.
Yeah, you filled it out pretty well there. with the descriptions. We can go position by position and talk a little bit about snap counts and stuff like that. I want to get into the rest of Miami's schedule because obviously, like you mentioned, this is an FCS program. I mean, they had some good players. I thought their quarterbacks were pretty fast and elusive. At times, they made Miami's defense look slow. But Bethune-Cookman always has athletes. It's the question of can they ever put it together, right? I mean, FAMU was a good team last year. They were 9-3, so it's not like Bethune hasn't won in the past. They haven't figured things out, but this is the kind of opponent. To me, it was the kind of performance you wanted, where it was decided and there weren't many negative plays on offense. I think that was the key. I was more worried about the offense than I was the defense, especially after everything I heard about the defensive line. They only ended up getting 2 sacks in this game, but part of it, I think, was they weren't, like you said, showing maybe a whole lot in terms of pressures and exotic blitzes and things because they're saving it for down the road. But we can get into a lot of different stuff. Like I said, future opponents on Miami's schedule. We have a mailbag we're going to talk about later in this podcast. If you're listening to this on SoundCloud or Apple Podcast or whatever, we're going to play my interview from last Wednesday with our Texas expert, Sam Khan of The Athletic. We talked about Texas A&M since that's the game everybody's really looking forward to. He gave us kind of an early taste of A&M. A&M went out and beat Sam Houston 31-0 yesterday. I know people are like, well, Sam Houston, it's an FCS team, should be more than 31-0. But the reality is, I mean, Sam Houston won the FCS championship a couple of years ago, and they're on the way up to the FBS level. So nothing to just kind of dismiss or anything like that, or take it as a sign that A&M isn't good. So that'll be on later in the podcast, as well as our mailbag. But I want to start with this expectations, because I feel like that really dictates the conversation every year, right? It's what we expect to happen in year one. I ran a poll pregame, Carlos, on Twitter, and again, this is Twitter, right? So what are we doing?
A great cross section of America here, but hey,
right, but we did get 1,258 votes, and I basically laid out 4 selections and said, what's going to make you happy this year? Minimum results, right? Like you have to have this in order to be happy as a Miami fan at the end of the season. Coastal Division title won out, 65.3% of the vote. ACC title came in second with 20%. The other 2 selections were 8 wins, which is more than last year. We got 12%, and then 7 wins, which is matching last year, 1.6. So ultimately, I mean,
wow, reasonable.
It's what?
That was reasonable. I thought ACC reasonable. Championship would have been number 1, but hey, look at the fan base. You guys, we're coming along, man. We're evolving here as a fan base, and I'm loving it.
Yeah, a little bit. I'd say a little bit. I do think people were a little bit too freaked out about the big plays. And as I wrote in my story for The Athletic today in my takeaways, it was basically 9 negative plays on defense where they didn't do their job, right? 6 passing, 3 rushing, the 3 runs by the 3 scrambles that were more than 15 yards by their quarterbacks that changed the field position, and then the 6 passing plays, which really most of them happened in the first half. That opening series, you saw a couple where you had Cam Kitchens missing a block, you had DJ Ivey missing a tackle. I mean, not Cam Kitchens missing a block, but missing a tackle in the open field. But I thought if there was one scene, and you can agree with me or disagree with me, but the one scene that I thought told us all that, hey, this is a different regime, is when Cam Kitchens made that diving pick, man. And what I'm gonna talk about. I mean, Mario ate him alive, him and the defense. He got everybody around Kevin Steele and was like, hey, you can't spike the football. You can't get a 15-yard penalty on this, because that's different when we play a good team, right? When we play a game that matters, you can't have this. And I thought, if ever a moment to just show you the difference between Manny Diaz and his leadership and Mario Cristobal's leadership, it was that, because Mario ultimately has a bigger vision for everything. And to me, more than anything, it said, it just reminded you why the turnover chain isn't around, why those kind of expectations are different, because you could celebrate an interception, you could celebrate a fumble, Carlos, but in the end, it really doesn't mean anything if you're not winning on the field. And I think Miami was winning that game. We knew it was going to be a blowout. And right then and there, Mario's like, no, bro, different era.
Yeah, it's taking that moment and using it as a teachable moment. And it's, giving up the instant gratification, the short-term success, the short-term hype that would have come along with it, because right there, then and there, the first thing they would have done is run to Cam, have him take his helmet off and slap the chain on him.
And he did. Him and Tyreek Stevenson ran up and jumped on the bench and stood up and waving to the crowd.
Yeah.
And it's almost like they forgot the turnover chain was gone for a half second. Like they and then
until Mario got up in their ass. It's like, hey, get off the bench. We don't do that shit here anymore. Okay. And it's giving up that instant gratification for the long-term success, because like you're saying, what if that happens at Texas A&M? You get an interception at a key moment in a game, and now you give up 15 yards, and that sets you back where you might have been in scoring position. You have to drive to score and win the game. And instead of being at the 45-yard line, now you're back to the 30, and you have to climb even further with time expiring. So those are lessons that are great to be learned in games like this. You want to learn those in games like this against Bethune, against Southern Miss, Middle Tennessee, where you know the outcome is going to be in hand, because you don't want that creeping up in games that really matter, an ACC play or against a team like Texas A&M. So It was great to see. And I think the other great thing to see was the way Mario handled it at the press conference after the game, where he said, Cam's a great human being. He's a great football player. He's a great guy. He got caught up in the moment. It happens. We just have to teach him that this isn't the way from now on. And he's got it. We're not worried about it.
Right. And I think that was important. It shows you how far Mario has come as an adult, right? And as a human being, right? Growing. He's 51 years old. I think hot-blooded Latin Mario Cristobal 15 years ago maybe goes in on the kid in the post-game press conference a little bit and says, but he immediately, like you said, hey, he's a good person. It's a teaching moment, etc. So, but really, I mean, that's the start of the Mario era. That's the image that's going to stick in my mind of, hey, this is a different regime. All right, like I said, we're going to get into how Miami's future opponents did and the mailbag, but some other good / takeaways from this game. Number one, no drops by the receivers. I mean, that was such a big storyline in camp, Carlos, that they were dropping balls left and right. You mentioned being able to throw the ball deep. I counted when I looked at the quarterback information. I think
it's like 20+ yard passes by TBD, I think it was.
Right, but he was 4 of 4 on throws, 15 yards down the field in the air. And Jake Garcia was 1 of 1. So 5 of 5 for them. No drops. I mean, they didn't go down the field much. 5 times is not a lot.
Right.
Where you're throwing the ball down the field. But that was important.
And the big one wasn't even like a deep pass down the sideline. It was a deep crosser to Restrepo where he caught it in a lot.
And ran 52 yards.
Yeah.
The other thing, only 6 penalties for 48 yards. We know how much penalties were a big deal, obviously, last year for this team and in the last several years. 3 on each side of the ball. Kobe Young, the new receiver, got called for a block in the back that negated a touchdown. You had an eligible man downfield, Will Mallory, which I still don't understand. If he's the tight end, I guess it's just where he lined up.
Yeah, he lined up incorrectly, and that's why he wasn't eligible to come down the field.
You had a false start on Dominic Mammarelli, the tight end, and that was going to be a trick play where Ja'Cory Brown had come in and they were going to run something special there just to make other teams have to practice that probably for the rest of the season. And then defensively, you had the Kitchens unsportsmanlike conduct. He got called for pass interference where he got to the.
Yeah, I thought that was a little touchy there.
Yeah, he may have gotten there a second early or half second early, but it wasn't blatant.
Yeah.
And then you had the delay of game on Daryl Jackson, which I don't know what that was for, but maybe a substitution, whatever. But really, I mean, not a lot of self-inflicted wounds from a penalty standpoint. That was good. Anything else that we didn't cover yet that you saw as good?
Yeah, I mean, one of the, or at least interesting, I think one of the things that I saw also was that they didn't give up a lot of negative plays in the run game.
Right.
So they only had, the PFF has a stat called stops, where where the defense makes a tackle that's a negative play for the offense. Bethune-Cookman was only credited with 5 of those the entire game. And that doesn't necessarily mean it was a tackle for a loss. It means it was a 0 to 1 yard gain or something of that nature. So that's very little considering an entire football game. The only offensive lineman, there was only 1, 2, 3, 4 offensive linemen that had under a 70 run blocking grade. And for people that don't know, 69 is average with PFF, correct?
I think 60 is the average mark.
60 is the average mark. Okay, so we were well above that as a team. Only Matthew McCoy, Lawrence Seymour, Jalen Rivers, and Jonathan Dennis had below a 70. And those guys, the lowest scoring one was Jonathan Dennis at 65.8. So it wasn't bad at all. Right. Only one offensive lineman under 70 in pass blocking. That was Ja'Kai Clark at 69.2. So again, they did an excellent job in that area. It just seemed like a different offense. I think Henry Parrish looked very good running the football. I think he was very patient, setting up his blocks and knowing when to accelerate and hit the hole. He seems to me like a thicker, stronger Jalen Knighton with a little bit less explosiveness, but he's really good out of the backfield catching the football as well. Really patient, good vision. I like what I saw out of him. Thad ran the ball very well. Like I said, he led the team in yards after contact. Thad Franklin had 57 of his yards after contact. He averaged 6.33 yards after contact, which is amazing. Yeah. Henry Parrish had 50 after contact, but was only averaging 3.5, 3.6 after contact. Defensively, I thought Mesidor looked really good. I thought he was the one that popped to me the most on the defensive line in terms of being steady and impactful. Moultrie looked good to me as well. Leonard Taylor, before he got hurt, was being very impactful on the defensive line. It was nice to see Frierson get that interception for a touchdown, get that pick six, be in the right spot. So again, like we're saying, it's a lot of positive things, but again, we have to also factor in the opponent. So we didn't learn a whole lot. It's just nice to get them out there, get the kinks out, and get ready for the next one.
7 missed tackles for Miami as a team, 2 for Cam Kitchens, 1 for Chase Smith, 1 for Avonte Williams, 1 for Jared Harrison Hunt, 1 for Ivy, and 1 for Al Blades total. So look, 7 is a lot better than in the 30s, which we saw last year against Michigan State. There were other games that it was over 15, and they weren't, great opponents per se.
And offensively, one more stat offensively, which has been plaguing the Hurricanes for the last 5 years. They were 7 for 7 on third down on offense.
Yeah, that was good to see as well. We mentioned the no drops by the receivers, the penalties we hit on, special teams we hit on. Other observations: James Williams was in the box for 20 of his 40 snaps. So we talk about him playing the linebacker spot again. They won't ever call him a linebacker. That's not what he wants to be known as, or at least this year. But he was in the box for 20 of his 40 snaps. He obviously had a great read on the pick that he made in the second half, where you could see he was watching the quarterback and jumped at the right time to go get that ball, baiting him a little bit to throw that ball there. Some other things. Keyshawn Smith didn't have a pass thrown his way. There were 10 receivers or 10 players who caught passes. We talked a lot about 2 tight end sets and running backs and their involvement in the running game. The tight ends had 6 targets in the game. Every single one of them. Mallory had 3, Arroyo 1, Skinner 1, and Khalil Brantley 1 in terms of the guys who you would expect to get the ball thrown their way. Mammarelli played, but in the end, 6 targets to them, 3 to the running backs. Henry Parrish had those 3 targets out of the backfield. So 9 out of the 22 passes that were actually intended for receivers, for pass catchers, went to running backs and tight ends. What else? I could sit here and go over snap counts and who started. Obviously, Miami went with the 2 tight ends, Arroyo and Mallory in the starting lineup. The receivers were Restrepo and Ladson.
I've got one thing in terms of scheme offensively that's interesting.
Go ahead.
So we talked a lot about, like you said, with them using more tight end sets, and we're using more. We talked about using a tight end as an H-back in the backfield, along a fullback in the backfield. Mm-hmm. The gap run to zone run percentage. So gap run meaning pulling offensive linemen, power, pin and pull blocking schemes, as opposed to zone runs. Yes. Was 30 gap runs to 10 zone runs. So 75% of the runs were gap runs. Last season, the Hurricanes averaged 68.5% in zone runs. Wow. So it's a complete flip in a different direction. You could tell that in the scheme. I was surprised there was only 6 play action passes from what PFF said in terms of the percentage. So it was about 37.5% of the pass attempts by the quarterbacks were play action. 56%, well, this is TVD, 56% were dropbacks. So you're going to see a lot more straight dropback stuff and let TVD go to work and read the field. So that's interesting to see as well, where a lot of the passes last year were RPO based.
Yeah. Big difference in the Gaddis offense. Good stats there from you, Carlos. Defensively, I'm going to count it up here, how many defensive linemen ended up getting in the game. You mentioned the injury to Taylor, which, by the way, Mario postgame told us he thinks he's going to be fine. Same with Ja'Kai Clark, who tweaked his ankle early in the game and stayed in. He got his ankle wrapped up. He stayed in the game. Couple more injury notes. Jalen Knighton went through pregame warmups in pads and then went back to the locker room, got out of them. We all thought that there was a possibility he wouldn't play this game just because of him getting a little nicked up in camp. Zion Nelson didn't even go out there at all. So everything we said as far as predicting him not playing in the opener came true. He may not even play next week. We'll see where he's at physically, but he wasn't. And Logan Sagapolu was the other offensive lineman who was out that had gone through most of camp and for whatever reason Who knows if he got injured late in practice or whatever, but he was not in there in the opener. Those guys at some point will be back, probably Texas A&M. But let's go to defensive line. They went deep. There was a rotation. There were times when they kicked the ends inside on third downs and went with their NASCAR sort of pass rush, right? Where they have the faster guys on the inside. Agude played the most snaps of anybody, 25 snaps on the defense in terms of defensive line. Harvey started, Daryl Jackson started, Mesidor started, Taylor started. Those were your 4 starters. And then Elijah Roberts played 20 snaps. Jordan Miller played 19. Antonio Maltry played 17. Chance Williams played 16. Harrison Hunt and Lichtenstein 15. And then the true freshman, Nigel Kelly, who we heard so much about, he did get in there early on in the first half on some third down series, and he played 13 snaps. After that, it was kind of the other guys that just got some garbage time snaps. So really it was, if you add it up here, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You went 12 deep on the defensive line, which is what coaches were talking about, 6 inside, 6 outside. So those are your 12 guys that we'll probably see play a lot moving forward, those 12. At linebacker, Corey Flagg and Steed started, 34 snaps for Flagg, 30 for Steed, 17 for Keontra Smith, 16 for Caleb Johnson, the transfer from UCLA. Keontra's breakdown in pass coverage was why he's not starting and why you're not seeing more of him. You mentioned Flagg earlier. Caleb Johnson, to me, at some point or another, is going to start to turn it up and be the guy. Agree or disagree with that?
I agree. And I think there's one play in particular that sticks out in my mind. The reason why he's going to eventually take over Corey Flagg. There was a pass where Bethune threw it to the right sideline, and he was basically playing the weak side linebacker spot, flew to the ball, and was right there in front of the running back right before, as he caught the ball. Although he got a yard or two out of the play, he was still in position to make a play, whereas Corey Flagg would have been trailing that, wouldn't have gotten there in time, and probably would have been a bigger gain if he hadn't because of it. So I think you see Caleb Johnson's athletic ability and what it can be. I think it's just a matter of getting accustomed to the defense, getting acclimated to the reads, and eventually he's going to take over that linebacker spot. Corey Flagg also in other areas, he was lost a couple of times in pass coverage where he would get into his pass drop and guys would be catching the ball right next to him because he's not having the spatial awareness of where the routes are coming from and reading the quarterback's eyes. So I think that eventually is going to be what's going to be his downfall, his lack of athletic ability and his inability to be good in pass coverage, which are 2 of Caleb Johnson's strengths.
Yeah. Cornerbacks, Ivy started, Stevenson started, Corey Couch started. None of those were really surprises considering the way coaches were talking about Ivy in camp. 37 snaps for Stevenson and Ivy. Couch played 31. Frierson, I'm listed as a cornerback because when you play that slot and you have to be in coverage, I know they're going to call him the star, but in the end, him and Couch, I mean, it's a nickelback. And very rarely will you see. I thought Frierson, obviously, he had the pick 6 off the deflection from Mesidor, but I thought he did a good job early on, hitting the running back at the line of scrimmage, not allowing, Bethune to convert a 3rd and short. Daryl Porter Jr., the transfer from West Virginia, got 18 snaps. Isaiah Dunson, 13. And then we heard a lot about Malik Curtis in camp, only played 8 snaps after all the high praise. And then the 2 freshmen, Jaden Harris, Kamari Rogers, 4 snaps and 3 snaps. So I think on most Saturdays, we will probably see the first 5 guys I mentioned or 6 guys I mentioned with Isaiah Dunson and Frierson sort of, in the slot with Couch. Those will be your 6 cornerbacks probably most of the season. Curtis, we'll have to see if he takes that next step and the coaches trust him to be in the game. But, Stevenson did get burned in coverage for that 44-yard gain, and it was kind of a moment where it reminded you, okay, his speed. Yeah.
And it was just a straight go route. And one of the issues was he made contact with the receiver, and he hesitated a little bit on his back pedal. But the guy just straight up ran by him. And that's something you can't have. If guys from Bethune are going to be running by Tyreek Stevenson, that's going to be a liability down the road when they face better competition and real athletic receivers from other teams. And the other thing is, I think at some point they have to find an answer for who's going to be the other outside corner. It might be Daryl Porter Jr. because I don't trust DJ Ivy. I mean, we've been saying this for a long time. I've said it a long time on the podcast. DJ Ivy is going to DJ Ivy, and the dude is not there mentally. He's a practice superhero apparently, and he does all the great things at practice. And I feel bad for the kid because he's got a ton of athletic ability. He's been here a long time. You want to see him succeed. You want to see him be a key part of the program, but he's been so up and down since he's been here that, at some point he's going to have to just turn the corner, let that light switch go on, or get replaced, because it's going to be rough for him moving forward if he doesn't turn it around quickly.
I thought some of the decisions from the coaching staff, and again, this is my opinion, this is nothing I've heard. I thought some of the decisions in terms of who started, and who got play in this game is them also trying to give these guys an opportunity to keep them involved, because we know how this is. Confidence is everything, and you have to feed some of these guys that so that they deliver. Frank Ladson didn't drop a ball. He caught his 2 passes that were thrown his way. All we heard about was the struggles he had in camp, right? That he was inconsistent. So you start him, you give him that opportunity to shine after he transferred here. It also sends a good message, right, to other transfers. You transfer here, you're going to get a chance to play. And so, there's a lot of different reasons why guys play in football today. We'll see what happens when the games matter and how those rotations change. All right, at safety, we mentioned James Williams and Kitchens played 40 snaps. They both started. Al Blades, the one little interesting tidbit was that Al Blades played more than Avante Williams, 22 snaps for him, 14 for Avante, and then Brian Balaam and Markeith Williams, the true freshman, played 6 and 4 snaps respectively. But the Blades thing kind of caught me by surprise, because I would have expected Avante to get more work.
Yeah, me too. And the way it graded out, I think Al had an okay game. Avante also didn't really pop too much. I think Avante's coverage score was a 46.4, which is not good at all. Right. Al Blades wasn't all that great either at 57.3, but he was slightly better. So I don't know what's going on there. Maybe it's just a situation where Al's playing better in practice, where they want a steadying hand as the first, safety off the bench, an older guy that could settle the defense when either James Williams or Cam Kitchens are out off the field. Who knows? We'll see what it looks like moving forward.
I ran into my buddy Andrew Ferrelli from the South Florida Express. He was there at the game. We talked a little bit of high school football because he went to go see American Heritage take on Lakeland Lake Gibson on Friday. I called you when I was driving to the Dillard Chaminade game. I bring this up just to say that the one cool thing that I saw on Saturday at the stadium was that new F1, the new F1 race that they hosted at the stadium. They have this new facility that they built, I guess, for fans during the race. And ultimately turned it into the recruit hangout, right? For pregame and postgame. And I thought that was a really good idea. Really good job by Miami to utilize that. It looks like a nice area. It's kind of private, looks kind of exclusive, even if it isn't. Yeah. And they had a bunch of kids there. Nathaniel Joseph, who's the commitment from Edison. You had Ruben Bain. You had the American Heritage kids. Damari Brown was there. Dillard sent Christopher Johnson, who Miami's after, and Antoine Jackson, who's the 2024 cornerback commitment. A couple things. I will have Andrew back on with me again to talk football at some point, but just to touch on it real quick, Carlos, I watched the Christopher Johnson kid. He scored an 80-yard touchdown on a screen to start the game. I wasn't there for that. I was in the parking lot trying to get a space at that point. But he did score on a toss later in the game. One thing I will say about Johnson, he looks more like a receiver to me than he does a back. And that's one criticism I've heard from others. I would agree with that. I think he's kind of like Brashard Smith, a lot of straight line speed, right, a lot of explosiveness, but the wiggle is not there. There were a lot of times where he was running into the line of scrimmage and not getting anywhere. Antoine Jackson lined up against that Jermaine Smith kid, who's one of the top receivers in the country in 24 from Chaminade. And he deflected a couple passes. They tried to go to him a couple times. I think with a better quarterback, Jeremiah Smith will probably put up numbers. But what I liked from Jackson was there was a lot of confidence. And the whole game he was talking trash with the Chaminade sideline, and he wasn't afraid. And I think that's awesome. Good sign. So just a couple little insights from my high school experience that I wanted to share. And then I wanted to mention the recruit hangout. What we learned about Miami's future opponents. Anything pull you from Saturday that you watched? And I don't know if you did scoreboard watching or if you checked out anybody else. Thursday night, right? Pittsburgh played. You had Virginia Tech.
Yeah, watch that game.
Yeah. What were your takeaways? And I'll share some of my thoughts as we go through it.
Sure. So I thought, even though the result was different and maybe the numbers were a little bit skewed towards the other guy, I thought JT Daniels looked better to me than Keaton Slopes. I think JT Daniels was playing under a lot of pressure all game long. Yep. When that Pittsburgh defensive line, he had guys in his face the whole game, and he stuck in there and he was delivering the ball and making plays when he had to. He impressed me with his toughness and his ability to make plays under that kind of pressure. Whereas Keaton Slovis to me was more efficient. I think he was more like a dinker and a dunker. He didn't really impress me with his playmaking ability. He had good numbers, but he's not the next coming of Kenny Pickett, I would say. I think he is maybe a slightly below Kenny Pickett in terms of his skill set, but he's good enough to help them win. And I thought Pittsburgh's receivers were better than I thought they were going to be.
Even with the drop touchdown, I mean, he was behind
the
defense there.
Right, he was behind the defense, but at the same time, they also made timely plays when they needed to. And you didn't expect them to have some explosive plays that they did once they lost Jordan Addison. So I thought they looked better than I anticipated. I thought they were just going to be trash, but they weren't. They were pretty good. They weren't bad.
I was just going to add to the Pittsburgh thoughts, and you can interject too if you want. But 5 sacks for Slovis. The offensive line is supposed to be really good. I would put most of those on Slovis, who put, as somebody told me this weekend, he put the slow in Slovis in terms of decision making. But and they also gave up a boatload of rushing yards, which was kind of concerning because it's not like West Virginia has some tremendous rushing offense. West Virginia rolled up 190 yards rushing, 2 scores against Pittsburgh, which led the ACC in run defense last season, 89.21 yards per game. That to me was kind of a little bit more troublesome, the fact that they gave up so many rushing yards.
Yeah, and I agree. Like you said, I think the offensive line for Pittsburgh is not as good as they thought it was going to be, even though, like you said, a lot of it was coverage sacks based on what Keaton Slovis was doing with the football, holding on to it too long. But defensively, it looks like it's feast or famine. If they're not getting sacks, if they're not getting pressure on the quarterback, then they're getting beat down the field. Their secondary isn't all that great, and they're giving up a lot of yards rushing. So it's sort of I know it's one game, but it's brought Pittsburgh down a level to me in terms of how tough they're going to be on the schedule. It makes me less concerned about them.
All right, that's the last game of the season. The 2 before that, Clemson and Georgia Tech, they've yet to take the field. They play Monday night in Atlanta at the Mercedes-Benz Dome. Obviously, Georgia Tech's a team that is relying big time on the transfer portal to kind of change the culture there. Jeff Collins is on the hot seat. Nobody's expecting him really to last past this season. Clemson, of course, opens the season, I think, ranked 4th in the country. They're 4th in the ESPN Power Index. And 5th in the 247 Sports Team Talent Composite, by the way, which I included in my little breakdown here of all these teams because I want everybody to kind of know this stuff or at least have it in the back of their mind. Georgia Tech is 71st in the Power Index, 30th in the 247 Sports Talent Composite, which measures basically, what the recruits, what they were all ranked as recruits, the players on scholarship there. FSU plays tonight against LSU. Obviously, that'll tell us a lot more about the Seminoles. They debuted with the 47-7 win over Duquesne, had 3 100-yard rushing running backs in that game. Seminoles ranked 36 in the Power Index, 17th in the 247 Sports Team Talent Composite. All right, now let's get to some teams that will have already played, obviously, as we're recording this.
And I think this FSU could pull the offset tonight, but I think at the very least it's going to be close.
Right. I think FSU is going to be better than they were last year, in my opinion.
I believe so too,
but we'll see. All right, Virginia opened the season, the Tony Elliott era, with a 34-17 home victory over Richmond, which was 6-5 last season in FCS program. They fell behind 7-0 early. Brennan Armstrong, they kind of turned things around quickly, went up 28-10 at the half. They put up 505 yards of offense. We know they have good receivers. Armstrong was 21 of 33 passing, 246 yards, 2 touchdowns and a pick. He also had a 64-yard touchdown run, 105 yards rushing total. Cavaliers 65th in the ESPN Power Index, 59th in the 247 Sports Team Talent Composite. Anything from Virginia give you any fear? Is it just the receivers in the passing game that you think could be problematic for Miami?
It's the receivers. He's got really good receivers. Brennan Armstrong as a whole, not just as a quarterback, his athletic ability also, which he's been hurt the last couple of years, hasn't been able to show it as much in the past. Early on in his career, he did. He was known more as a dual threat quarterback. And I think if he adds that part of his game back again, he's going to be tough to defend. I think the other thing is the offensive line looked better than people anticipated, but then again, it's Richmond. So we need to see a little bit more before we start saying, okay, Virginia's offensive line is actually going to be decent. It's not going to be bad. Giving up 17 points to Richmond defensively, I wasn't really impressed with their defense. We'll see what happens down the road, but I think Virginia is who we thought they were for now. I still need to see more of them before we make a decision as to, how tough this team is going to be on the schedule, where I change my opinion about it.
Duke, I thought, had a really impressive opening.
Yes.
They beat Temple 30-0 at home, 500 yards total offense. Their quarterback, Riley Leonard, looked good, 24 of 30 passing, 328 yards, 2 touchdowns. He also ran the ball well, 64 yards, so sort of a dual threat back there. Their receivers did well. They held Temple to only 179 yards total offense, 65 rushing. So Mike Elko, who was the Texas A&M defensive coordinator, came over, and I thought he maximized what he had, and it was a really good debut for him.
And Temple's a decent team. They're not a bad team. And I think I can't even remember the last time Duke shut out an FBS opponent, or at least a group of 5 opponent or a Power 5 opponent. So
yeah,
that's impressive by Elko in his first game. And I think I tweeted this out that I think Duke is going to end up being better than Virginia Tech this year.
And right now, the ESPN Power Index agrees with you because they've got Duke 83rd, they've got Virginia Tech 85th, Duke 63rd talent-wise in terms of that 247 Sports team talent rankings, and then Virginia Tech is 52nd. They've recruited a little bit better, but ranked 85th in the Power Index. Virginia Tech, obviously, disappointing loss, let the league down in my mind. Old Dominion 20-17. They lose Brent Pry's debut, turned it over 5 times. Blew a 7-point lead in the fourth quarter. Grant Wells, the Marshall transfer, took over at quarterback, 21 of 36 for 193 yards and a touchdown, but 4 picks.
Yeah,
not winning football for them. They also had a bad snap on a field goal that led to a touchdown. So it's not like the defense gave up a ton, but offensively it was a nightmare.
Yeah, they're still pretty bad on offense. They might be worse than they were last year, which is saying something. So I think Virginia Tech could end up being a 4-win team this year. I know turnovers had a lot to do with it in this game, right, but still, you've got to be more disciplined than that, be more efficient when you're going up against a team like ODU. You can't be losing that game. That's terrible.
Yeah, it was on the road. I'll give them that.
At the juggernaut home field advantage that Old Dominion has.
Well, North Carolina, they're 2-0. They've won 3 straight games over the Hurricanes, so we have to respect their talent. They are 16th in the 247 Sports team talent composite rankings, 34th in the ESPN Power Index, but their defense under their new coordinator, Gene Chizik, has not been very good. They gave up 40 points in the fourth quarter in that 63-61 win over Appalachian State. They're giving up 492 yards a game to FAMU and Appalachian State. That's not winning football in the long run. But their quarterback, Drake May,
he's legit.
He's legit. 53 of 73. 646 yards, 9 touchdowns, no picks, and he's also run the ball pretty well. 16 carries, 131 yards, and a score. So he's not just a guy who's going to be a statue back there in the pocket.
Yeah, and it's strange. You were thinking going into the season, how does North Carolina replace Sam Howell? Not just from the passing perspective, but the way he was using his legs last year and part of the run game. And Drake May looks better in both areas right now. He's really lighting up as a quarterback. And I actually texted you and Kelvin this during the game. I was like, if Texas A&M had Drake May at quarterback, they'd definitely be a college football playoff team. They might win it all because that dude is legit. He's for real. The problem is their defense is giving up more points than North Carolina basketball did this past season. And that is concerning. All right. So I don't know what they need to do. Fire Gene Chizik, hire Hubert Davis as a defensive coordinator. Maybe that helps. But man, 61 points to App State, 40 in the fourth. What the hell are they doing? They might just not, they're not even doing anything. They're just laying down on the field and then these guys both race them up and down the field.
And they've got good players. They've got talented guys. I mean, 4-star, 5-star defensive linemen. They've got 5-star cornerbacks. I mean, they've got guys that should be better than they're performing. Maybe they'll turn it around at some point, but right now,
yeah, they're gonna start averaging, giving up only 35 a game.
Right. That'll be a start. All right. I mentioned Texas A&M. Sam Conn will be on the podcast, pre-recorded from last week, talking about A&M, breaking down their roster. So I'm not going to get into it too much, but they did beat Sam Houston, as I mentioned, 31-0. Sam Houston only had 10 first downs, 198 yards of total offense.
Yeah,
that's pretty good to hold, a recent national champion to that kind of performance. And then Haynes King, their quarterback, 20 of 31, 364 yards, 3 touchdowns. They only ran for 110 yards, averaged 3.4 yards a carry. But I mean, to me, I think Jimbo Fisher right now is just worried about his passing game, trying to get that thing going with Haynes King and those receivers. And Nia Smith, 6 catches, 164 yards, 2 scores.
Keith Brown too had a score, right?
Yeah. The Aggies 21st in the ESPN Power Index, even though they're number 6 in the AP poll. So ESPN Power Index, a little less excited about Texas A&M but they are fourth in the 247 Sports Team Talent Composite. Again, we don't have to break them down. I'm going to have a whole breakdown with Sam Khan later. I don't know if you have any thoughts.
Yeah,
thoughts.
I think it was their defense is very impressive. They held Sam Houston, I think it was to 1 of 12 on third down, which was incredible. Like you said, under 200 yards total offense. Their defense is going to be one of the best in the country. They're going to get better as the season goes on. DJ Jerkin's a really good defensive coordinator. You know, Mike Elko was as well, but it's a little bit of a change in the system. And as they get adapted to it, they're going to be even better. Of course, they've got a ton of talent on that side of the ball. To me, although the numbers say that Hayes King balled out, he's a little erratic. He's a little inconsistent. You know, they may end up being better down the road with Max Johnson, who's a little bit more steady, a little bit more consistent. But Hayes King has the ability to give you the big play, and I think that's why Jimbo started him. Eventually, look at the run game going. Like you said, I think they were focusing more on trying to get Hayes King in that passing game going, getting acclimated after the injury last year and getting settled back in. I'd like to see him next in a couple more games, see what he looks like and see if he develops. If he's as erratic as I saw a little bit against Sam Houston State, I think the Canes defense can get a couple picks against him.
Appalachian State plays Texas A&M next. So they scored 61 in North Carolina. We'll learn a lot about Texas A&M and North Carolina.
Yeah, listen, I like App State. I like their offense. You know, their two running backs, Noel, did a hell of a job against North Carolina, blew up. Chase Bryce played really well. That's not happening against A&M. I think at best, if they score 17 against A&M, they should be happy.
All right. Part of the reason I want to do all this is to let people know Miami's next other two opponents not named Texas A&M, Southern Miss and Middle Tennessee State, did not look very good. Middle Tennessee State, they were 7-6 last year, won the Bahamas Bowl. They got blown out by James Madison, 44-7 on Saturday.
Listen, James Madison was a hell of a president, but I don't know about
only 10 first downs for Middle Tennessee, 12 rushing yards in that game. Their only score came when they were down 37-0 on a 26-yard pass. The ESPN Power Index has them 109th, 103rd in the 247 Sports Team Talent Composite. So again, you talk about Bethune-Cookman, right? What kind of challenge can you measure? I don't know that we're going to get much out of the Middle Tennessee State game, but that could be good because that's after the Texas A&M game, and that might be
nice little rest.
Nice little rest for some guys. Southern Miss, who is the next opponent, they lost 29-27 at home to Liberty, which is a good program. Liberty's not a bad team.
Yeah, they've been good for the last few years with Hugh Freeze.
But they were 3-9 last year, and it was a quadruple overtime loss at home. And they were basically down to their third string quarterback in this game. Didn't throw the ball well at all. 5 of 13 passing, 137 yards, 3 picks for Southern Miss's offense at home against Liberty. So you talk about Miami's defense. Are they really going to be challenged this week? We'll see. Frank Gore Jr. Ran it 32 times for 178 yards and 2 touchdowns. Southern Miss pass to run ratio, 54 runs, 13 pass attempts. So the run defense, right? We talk about that. How's
going to get a great test next week.
They're going to be tested. Frank Gore Jr. can play.
Yeah.
But you don't have the threat of the passing game, really. So it'll be interesting. Any other thoughts on this game coming up, Carlos?
Yeah, I mean, that was an interesting result to me. It showed Southern Miss's fight and their determination, you know, not having a quarterback, not having the ability to throw the ball, just grinding it out on the ground and playing defense against a Liberty team that was scoring a lot of points the last couple of years under Hugh Freeze. That was an impressive result for them. But I think at the end of the day, like you said, if all you have to focus on in the run game, you're going to see a lot of loaded boxes for the Hurricanes, man-to-man coverage on the outside, daring Southern Miss to try and throw the football, and that's not a position you want to be in if you're Southern Miss.
All right, I want to get into the mailbag, and then we're going to wrap this puppy up because
one more ACC result that I found pretty interesting.
Go ahead, go for it.
Syracuse bitch slapping Louisville 31-7, and Malik Cunningham playing like total crap.
That was very good. In fact, makes my preseason prediction look like ass because I said Malik Cunningham might be the conference's player of the year. Instead, they're getting bitch slapped, like you said, by Syracuse.
Yeah.
Clearly, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about.
Well, listen, it happens to all of us, man. We come in here with these expectations that guys are going to actually get better from year to year. And all of a sudden, game one, they lay an egg. And you're like, what the hell was I thinking?
All right, let's get to the wide right mailbag. This is from Frank Russo, Doc R89 on Twitter. Who are the 3 new starters at linebacker? Looks like Frank is done with this group of guys.
Listen, Wayman Seed was okay. Corey Flagg was okay. To me, his issues were more in pass coverage and, again, showing lack of athletic ability getting to the football. He's a really good blitzer for whatever reason. I don't know why. He looks more athletic when he blitzes. But I think, like you said, eventually you'll see Caleb Johnson in there with Steed, or you might see Chase Smith alongside him, or maybe Keontre if he gets his act together. Because I think there were times when both Caleb Johnson and Keontre Smith were in there where the defense looked better. But then you had those mental farts from Keontre Smith.
Yeah, it's a tough deal. I think if you could combine the talents of Keontre Smith, Wayman Steed, and Corey Flagg, you might have a decent linebacker.
Yeah.
The problem is you need to play all of them because you just don't have the depth at that position, to at least not yet, until Basaint and these other guys, like you said, Chase Smith, come along and are ready. But that's going to take a while. I don't think you see any changes. I think Corey Flagg and Wayman Steed start at least through the Texas A&M game, and then after that we may see a reevaluation. But I just don't see any changes coming. This is from NRP12 on Twitter. What are the thoughts about the defense? It appears the defense lacks team speed. Well, we just kind of touched on that, didn't we? NRP12 on Twitter. I don't know if it's speed or if it's smarts or if it's just, some teams are going to be able to expose Miami. There's going to be times, like you said, Carlos, where their quarterbacks are going to break containment. They're going to roll them out, and they're going to be able to find creases in this defense because the linebackers aren't fast enough to get to where they need to be, and that some of the defensive linemen aren't fast enough to keep up with those quarterbacks. That's what's happening in college football today. These athletic, fast quarterbacks that can run, they create problems. And to me, is Miami's defense fast enough? No, but that's why Mario is trying to recruit better players here. And they look slow against Bethune-Cookman at times, but are they going to look slow against everybody else in the ACC? Probably not. I would say they'll look slow against Texas A&M and Clemson, and maybe North Carolina at times, but I don't think there's any other offenses on the schedule right now that I sit there and I say, well, these there's no match. There's no way Miami has enough speed to play with those teams.
Right. And I think when you're lacking overall team speed on defense, then that makes technique and assignment responsibility and soundness in terms of
and gang tackling.
And gang tackling, that makes it that much more important, right? So like we talked about that Nigel Lee Kelly play where he collapsed the pocket and rather than staying outside contained, he came in too far down the line and let the quarterback escape, things like that. And I think a lot of the scrambles happened when Miami was in man coverage and had their backs turned to the ball in the secondary. And that's when the quarterbacks were sort of getting loose, which is something you need to work on. I think eventually you'll get it down. The concerning thing to me is when you've got, your supposedly best corner getting beaten on straight go by a guy from Bethune, that's going to get exposed. I don't think DJ Ivy's slow or unathletic. I just think he's just not there mentally on occasion, right. And that's going to get exposed. So we'll see how it goes. I think they have enough speed to win the 9 or 10 games. I just think it's going to also require them to be sound in terms of their technique and their assignment responsibility.
This is from David Hernandez, D-Hernan _ on Twitter. What ACC team surprised you this week, and what are you expecting from Miami week 2 versus a tougher opponent? Well, we just kind of went over that, David, so I apologize that we killed your question with the ACC surprises. Syracuse was definitely the surprise. What am I expecting from Miami week 2 versus a tougher opponent? I think offensively, I want to see more of the good execution. I want to see the receivers continue to hold on to the ball. I don't want to see sacks. Southern Miss's defense will be better than Bethune's, I think.
Yeah.
So that'll be the real thing. And then, running, run defense. Can they hold, Frank Gore down, Frank Gore Jr.? Can they make sure that they wrap up well? Will it be more than 7 missed tackles, or will they keep it around that number? I think if they keep it under 10 missed tackles, then you're probably going to have a good defense. That's good tackling if you have it under 10.
Yep, I agree. And it's a situation where you want to see this offense continue to be clean and crisp and efficient like they were in game 1 and build off that.
All right, this is from G_Reg third leg, Greg, on Twitter. He's been on the show a few times with us here with his questions. How quick of a hook should we expect on guys like 11 and 8? That would be Corey Flagg and DJ Ivy. After hearing all camp how improved they are, just looks like more of the same. Well, I mean, that's the whole thing here, right? We talked about better coaching. We put all the blame on Manny Diaz. It's his defense. He recruited these guys. He didn't develop them, etc. this is where it becomes the chicken or the egg conversation, right? Like, can a coach simply get better results, or is it between the ears of those players? I don't think they're going to get the hook these first couple games. I think you're going to see Corey Flagg and DJ Ivy out there until they get to the point where somebody else who is better can replace them.
Yeah, until somebody else shows that they deserve more playing time. And I think eventually you'll see Daryl Porter Jr. move into that role and beat out DJ Ivy at some point. Just like we talked about Caleb Johnson replacing Corey Flagg at some point. It's going to happen. Just it's a matter of when.
Yeah. This is from JK Slay on Twitter. Is it too early to be concerned about the defense? Poor containment, missed tackles, inconsistent coverage. Great defensive coaches, but the back seven is essentially the same group that underperformed last year. Is this just a case of we have to wait for better talent? I mean, we've kind of been hitting on this subject a couple times. Is there better talent? When I look at the freshmen like Kamari Rogers, Jaden Harris, Markeith Williams, the safety that they picked up in this last class, do I see guys that are head and shoulders better? Do I see Malik Curtis being better? I think if they were, they'd be on the field already.
Yeah.
So can they be coached up better? Can they develop better habits in their 3 to 4 years? Yes. But I still think recruiting is what you're waiting for.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think as time goes on, remember, there's also a new defensive system. These guys got to get used to that. It's game one. They're just working out the kinks. All they've done is scrimmage each other. So you're going to see that defense get better with their assignments as time goes on. But again, like I said, there's some concerning spots at the corner position. I think the safeties are solid. The linebackers, of course, are still a question. I think the defensive line is solid. So it's a mixed bag on defense. And as time goes on, they'll find tighter rotations. They'll know who to count on, and they'll be better with the scheme.
This is from Asher Wildman 13 on Twitter. This is for you specifically, Carlos. If you're an opposing defense, would you ever put a man on Tyler Van Dyke in RPOs? It's like watching Kaya again. You know he isn't running the ball, and if he doesn't, it's rare. Does that hurt the offense?
No. You know why? Because eventually what they're going to do is if you're spying a guy in Tyler Van Dyke, or if you're just coming at him right away and ignoring him in terms of the RPO, they're going to run a play, not necessarily Tyler running the ball, but they'll sneak somebody by you in the RPO like they've done. You saw that with Will Mallard. You saw that with the tight ends. Well, they'll fake that RPO or they'll fake that run and just quick into the flat and do things where they're taking advantage of what you're doing. And eventually maybe Tyler will pull it and run it on his own. Tyler's athletic. He's more athletic than you think. He's not a burner, but we saw last year what he did when he tucked the ball and went on occasion. The other thing is it's not necessarily that he's reading for pulling to run. He might be reading to pull and throw something quick in the flat. So that's what they did with Kaya. They would pull and throw bubbles, or they would pull and throw something quick on the RPO reads. And I don't think it's a whole lot of RPO. It's just the action, the zone action, the way it looks.
All right, and this last one, it's just for me, apparently. Will Satterfield, Louisville's coach, be Miami's next offensive coordinator, or will it be Frank Ponce? Assuming Josh Gaddis leaves for a head coaching job after the season, I would give Frank Ponce probably the first crack. Would Mario bring in Satterfield or another former head coach and kind of screw over Ponce? I don't know. I mean, I think for Mario, look, he's convinced a lot of guys that are really good coaches or recruiters to remain on this staff in roles that they probably deserve, an assistant job or coordinator job elsewhere. Ponce is one of those guys. He'd be a coordinator somewhere else right now if he wasn't here at Miami. So, it'll be interesting. I don't know about the connection with Satterfield. I got to do a little bit more homework and see what kind of relationship they've got.
Wasn't Satterfield on his FIU staff at some point?
Right, but I think at some point or another, there's always relationships. There's guys who get along, right, and continue to have good relationships, and there's guys that don't. So exactly. That's why I'm not going to sit here and be like, I can answer this. I got to do my homework, Asher. I'll try to find out.
Yeah, and the fact that Frank came over here, leaving an offensive coordinator job at App State, not taking another Power 5 or Group of 5 offensive coordinator job to be the quarterbacks coach here says something. I think the expectation is that if Gaddis pretty soon, within a year or two, leaves for a head coaching job, Frank should be the next man up.
Right. All right, that's gonna wrap it up, Carlos. That was a good hour-long show. As I mentioned, for those listening on the podcast, not watching us on YouTube, you can tune into my interview with Sam Khan from The Athletic talking about Texas A&M. I just wanted to give our listeners an opportunity to get a little bit more insight on the Aggies because that's such a huge game. George Sedano was down here last week, hung out with Mario for the whole week, had all access. They're going to run that special that he's doing with him the week of the game.
Oh wow.
I'm flying out to Texas. I'll be out there actually 2 days early. I'll be in Houston, hanging out there, and actually going to watch Reed McKeska play, the tight end recruit who's part of this next class. So I'll be busy out there for there'll be a lot of conversation on A&M in the weeks ahead. I got one more podcast question just came in. This is from Brad Leonard, Insane Kane 09. Can we finally lower the expectations for the defense? Outside of safety, there isn't a ton of quality depth. The defensive line is still improving. Yes, there are a lot of good players, but having 8 good players doesn't mean you're dominant. Cornerbacks and linebackers are still extremely lacking. Agree or disagree with that sentiment?
Well, listen, I don't know if anybody coming into the season was expecting the defense to be dominant. I never had that expectation. I thought they'd be better. I thought they'd be they wouldn't be a liability like they were the last couple of years.
Right.
But I didn't think they were going to be dominant. I didn't. There's no, like you said, there's not enough talent on that side of the ball to be dominant at this point.
Mm-hmm.
There are areas that are better than they were. I mean, the defensive line obviously is a lot more talented than it's been in terms of depth. But we're still having those issues at linebacker and corner. But the safeties are solid. So,
well, what I would tell Brad is that there's ways to get around the dominant defensive lines. I think Miami's defensive line is going to be one of the better ones in the ACC. There's enough depth there and enough talent there, I think, to be very good. Not great, but very good. But there are ways to get around it, and that's just getting rid of the ball quickly and doing a whole lot of wide receiver screens, and there's ways to diffuse it. So in the end, yes, they're going to need solid tackling, as you mentioned, Carlos. And again, this isn't a great defense. It won't be a great defense for another year or two at least. But I think
if they're sound,
they're sound and better.
Yeah, but if they're sound, that'll go a long way, because like you said, if they try to take those quick shots with the wide receiver screens and bubbles and things of that nature, and they make tackles and they're sound in that, then that'll slow the offenses down.
All right, guys, make sure to tune in here to this interview with Sam Khan. If not, we will talk to you again soon.
Thanks for watching again on YouTube and putting up with these faces.